Okay, good morning. Steve Andrulonis here. This is Greater Grace Church, our morning devotional from Baltimore, and happy Tuesday to you. I want to stay in Galatians. This is what we were learning from our pulpit with Pastor Tom Schaller on Sunday, Galatians 5, and the flesh lusting against the Spirit, and the Spirit guiding us. A couple of things in Galatians 5. Earlier in Galatians 5, it says, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. That's one thing that was communicated to the Galatians by Paul. And then towards the end of the book of Galatians, we know that the fruit of the Spirit is love. And then to conclude chapter 5, Paul wrote this: "If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another." So I want to think about this little leaven part because in the message that we heard Sunday morning and also Sunday evening here in Baltimore, there was this point in the message talking about Tobiah and Nehemiah from the book of Nehemiah chapter 13. And this man, this enemy who had been an opposer of Nehemiah's work in Jerusalem, building the wall and reestablishing the foothold after the season of captivity that happened. Nehemiah came back, and Tobiah and Sanballat, they were two men mentioned there who were really trying to oppose the reestablishment of Jerusalem as a walled city and the base for the people of God, for the chosen people, for Israel, to be reestablished in a way. And so we notice that in Nehemiah 13 that somehow Tobiah managed to get himself a space in the courts of the house of the Lord, which is interesting. I think back to the story of Balaam in the book of Numbers. You know, Balaam was a soothsayer, a prophet for hire, and he was, he had an encounter with God and could hear from God to some degree. And, God told him he was hired by a king to curse the people of Israel, but throughout this encounter, several times he was led to places where he was supposed to pronounce a spell or a curse on the people of Israel, and he was prevented from doing it. But if we read on in the book, we know that Balaam did somehow get the people of Israel to choose a way that was apart from the way of God, and to bring themselves into sin and idolatry. And, they cursed themselves, you could say. They brought a curse upon themselves by choosing to go apart from the direction of God. And here with Tobiah finding his way with Nehemiah, somehow someone had allowed this man to set up shop inside the courts of the temple at Jerusalem. And this was while Nehemiah was away. And I think all of this, we can use this as an illustration to our spiritual mindset and our spiritual walk with God. As we read there at the end of chapter 5 in Galatians, live by the Spirit, keep in step with the Spirit in the English Standard Version. This is the thing. A little leaven can leaven the whole lump. Simple wrong decisions can throw us off. I'm always thinking about this when we consider this amazing telescope, the Hubble Space Telescope. It was put into orbit around the Earth to be aimed out into the outer reaches of space. But the grinding of the mirror system that was used to capture the light and see things far away was a micrometer, just a small millimeter, almost millimeter, the mirror was not fashioned the right way. And so the Hubble Space Telescope actually had to be retrofitted by a space shuttle mission with a sort of a pair of glasses, some sort of corrective lens that corrected this error. It was just a small error, just a tiny little error, but it made everything blurry. Just a little leaven can leaven the whole lump and can bring us into a walking in the way of carnality and the flesh. We know that this part of us is not gone. This sin nature is not gone in us. It's still very active. Paul wrote about this in chapter 7. There's this thing in me that has a tendency to go crooked, and we need to be focused on the Holy Spirit. Having a mind to work. That's a phrase from Nehemiah, earlier in Nehemiah. Nehemiah led this building of the wall, and the people had a mind to work, and they finished the wall in 52 days, even in spite of the opposition of this man, Tobiah, and his partner in this opposition, Sanballat. So Nehemiah, to me, represents the practical aspect of spiritual direction, and he was close to the king. He was close to the king during this time frame in the reign of the Medes and the Persians, and he was close to this king. He was a cupbearer. I think this means that he had to taste everything that the king was going to drink, because political intrigue being what it was, someone could have slipped a poison pill in there. And so Nehemiah, in his job, every time he picked up the cup, was putting his life on the line. And, spiritual direction. But, Nehemiah had a testimony to the king and queen. And when they saw him and his countenance and the grieving that he had for the state of Jerusalem, he managed to get a commission to come and restore the walls of the city and bring back a civic entity. There was the temple building that's really talked about in Ezra, but then there's also this civic project that brought the walls back into place with their gates, and the city was a safer place because of it. And, it continued. It continued to the days of Jesus, we know, and beyond. And so what am I saying here is that spirit direction is what God is after for us in our hearts. I read this morning in I read this morning in Psalm 119, I should say. And in a couple of places there, it talks about how it was good to be afflicted. And in two places there in this particular segment of Psalm 119, it talks about the goodness of affliction, the direction. And also in Proverbs, it's talking about you need reproof. We need reproof. We need to hear again and again and again the truth from the Bible. Because there's this little bit of leaven that we can allow to infect us and to flavor who we are. And like Tobiah, he has this little space where he shouldn't be. And there's things in our hearts that we shouldn't allow them to be. God can show us reproof. God can show us. He can teach us with a proverb and a psalm, a direction from one of the epistles. We can get that. Let us live by the Spirit. Let us live by the Spirit. Let us live by the Spirit, and let the candle of the Lord shine into our dark and shadowy spaces in our hearts. It's a never-ending process. But as we know in the book of James, We can ask for this. We can simply ask for the filling of the Spirit. He will give it to us, as it says in the book of Luke. He is not like an earthly father won't give a kid a snake if he asks for a fish. No, if we ask God for the Spirit, He will give us the Spirit. And let's keep asking for the Spirit to be shed abroad in our hearts, to take over those shadowy spaces, to let love, flow from us to our neighbors and even to our enemies. Let us live by the Spirit and walk in step with the Spirit. It's the only way to do it. We don't need this leaven. We don't need these people taking up spaces, these practices taking up spaces in our hearts and guiding us into ways that don't glorify God. We can live by the Spirit and glorify Him in our homes, in our churches, in our communities. It'll make such a difference. So that's it for today. Happy Tuesday. Have a great one. I'm Steve Andrulonis. Thank you for watching. You can share this, and you can also, if you want to see the messages from Sunday morning and Sunday evening, you can, right at this website, ggwo.org, you can go to the sermon archive and listen and be blessed by that also. All right. Have a great one. Goodbye.